Cat anus! Alright, YouTube. In the last 3 states that have had their primaries and caucuses, Rick Santorum pulled off surprising victories. I'd like to explain why this is humorous to me, and at the same time a little bit disturbing, but mainly just amusing. I mean, the chances of him getting the nomination are fairly slim. It looks like Ron Paul's going to take Maine. It looks like Romney will continue to take, a decent number of states. So Romney will probably win the nomination. It could go either way at this point. Gingrich, though, he looks like he's about done. I mean, really, he's just hanging on just to be a stubborn asshole. Here's the problem with Santorum, though. Even if he did get the nomination, you can kind of see minority groups, women, gays, feminists, liberals, and basically a great number of people within the American population turning out in droves to vote for Obama just to see Rick Santorum not get elected. Whereas with someone like Romney being more moderate, he's not going to really get the Republicans enthusiastic, but he wouldn't be able to get the Democrats enthusiastic for Obama because he'd be so much like Obama in the first place that it'd be sort of who gives a shit, that'd be about the way the campaign would be run. Ron Paul could energize the Republican campaign. I'm voting for Ron Paul if he gets the nomination, certainly. Here's the thing, though. If Ron Paul gets the nomination, I'm willing to vote Republican. If Mitt Romney gets the Republican nomination and chose Ron Paul as his running mate, or gave him some position in his campaign or a promise of a position upon winning, I'd vote for Mitt Romney. But if Santorum got the nomination, I wouldn't vote for him if you paid me $1 million. He's that big a goofball. Now, I've made a video before called Rick Santorum's Stupid Quotes, with spread it around, of course, in the title, for the Santorum joke that everyone is willfully ignorant of at times. But if you look at Rick Santorum's voting record, it's just obviously the record of someone who's been pandering under the table to people who are feeding him money and feeding him ideas and political support. I mean, that's exactly what you can say Rick Santorum's voting record belies. If you look at some of his quotes, he comes off as racially insensitive, extremely homophobic. I mean, there's no doubt about that. We know that Rick Santorum is homophobic. He comes off as either racially insensitive or possibly borderline racist, and I find it funny when people say Ron Paul's a racist and then ignore the fact that Rick Santorum is as well, and the fact that Newt Gingrich is as well, and they totally ignore that because they're just anti-Ron Paul, I guess, because he's a libertarian and he doesn't represent our conservative values. Here's the thing, though. If Santorum got the nomination, he would get absolutely crushed by Obama, because you'd see record turnout again. The reason Obama won in the first place wasn't because he was this golden shining star of virtue and he was this wonderful dude who had all these great ideas. It was because people were enthusiastic to vote for him because they wanted to vote against McCain, because McCain wanted to continue basically the same policies that George Bush had, the warmongering and so forth. Now, Obama's purveyed his own warmongering, which is a disappointment and one of the reasons I won't be voting for him again. But people primarily voted for Obama because he took up a pacifistic view, he took up a reformist view, and he said, we're going to get things done, we're going to fix all these problems. And McCain instead just basically took the same tired old line that George W. Bush had used and ran with it, and unfortunately George W. Bush wasn't popular. Here's the problem. Rick Santorum is taking up the same tired evangelical neoconservative view that George W. Bush took up, that John McCain took up, that George Herbert Walker Bush took up, that Ronald Reagan took up, that all of these failed presidents within the Republican Party, and I add Ronald Reagan to that list because of the Iran-Contra scandal, and the fact that when he left office, he wasn't that popular, and that's something that historians will tell you that the Republican Party deeply wants you to ignore, is the fact that when Reagan left office, he was considered a failed president by most of the people in the country. So giving him credit for the economy aside, which was really more Clinton's doing than Reagan's doing. I mean, we could go into a debate about that all day. Rick Santorum is taking up the same old, tired, neoconservative line that all of these others have taken up. The problem being, it didn't work for McCain. It barely worked for George W. Bush. George W. Bush technically didn't even win the first presidential election, and he barely won the second one. It was a very close race. Obama steamrolled McCain because people were tired of the war rhetoric. What is Rick Santorum doing? He's doing the same thing. So my message to the Republican Party is this. If you want to lose the election, go ahead and nominate somebody like Newt Gingrich, who is completely unethical, puts his foot in his mouth at every given opportunity, and can't debate worth shit, or Rick Santorum, who's a complete bigot and a warmonger, and the seniors will come out against him. Just look at his voting record for seniors, rated 10% by the APA. Seniors won't vote for him. Completely against gay rights. Completely against women's rights. So you've got gays and women now against him. Completely against all of these different things that are going to cause the Democratic majority to pour out in droves just to vote him down. It will ensure Obama's re-election. Obama will be re-elected if Rick Santorum or Newt Gingrich is put up against Obama. So those two candidates, if you choose to put them forward, you can go ahead and put them forward. They're not going to win. There is a snowflake's chance in hell of seeing President Rick Santorum or President Newt Gingrich. It's just not going to happen. There are two viable candidates right now running for president within the Republican Party. You've got Mitt Romney, who appeals to the moderates. He's not going to get the Republican Party enthusiastic, but at the very least, he won't give too much firepower to Obama. And then there's Ron Paul, who I consider the strongest candidate, and a lot of people discount him, but you've got to understand something. There's an interplay with politics. You know the old saying, politics makes strange bedfellows. Ron Paul is absorbing liberals to vote for him. He could literally steal the youth vote from Obama. Most of his voters are under 30 years old. We haven't seen a Republican candidate in 100 years that does that. It could be a new wave for the Republican Party, which they could then ride to glory in future elections. Will they give Ron Paul the chance to actually use his muscle and his enormous organizational capacity against Obama? I'm not sure whether they would. Certainly Ron Paul could run a good campaign because he's got the grassroots support, which is putting him even with the other three candidates. Just think of all the support he would have once all the super PACs backing the other Republicans switched and started backing him against Obama. He'd probably have a huge amount of money, huge amount of advertising, people on the ground in every state, massive numbers of them. He'd have the youth appeal. He'd have the senior vote potentially. He could steal the progressive libertarians away from Obama. He could steal all these critical voting blocks that traditionally the progressive libertarians and the youth always vote Democrat. They always have, and at least in the foreseeable future they always will. But one thing you've got with Ron Paul is that doesn't happen. But putting someone forth like Rick Santorum, it just doesn't make sense. You don't put up an extreme evangelical conservative up against a liberal like Obama. They can't win. To defeat Obama, you need either a moderate conservative like Romney, or you need an innovator like Ron Paul who's capable of stealing the Democratic voting blocks. You can't put Newt Gingrich up against him, because Newt Gingrich is just the wishy-washy neoconservative, Washington insider, ethics committee violator, sort of bad debater sort, sort of the bloated, traditional, semi-rich Republican. Newt Gingrich can't beat him. And Rick Santorum, he's not even really talking about the economy, he's just talking about social issues. He hasn't put one good idea forward about how we should fix things. All he's said is Obama's the worst president in the last 100 years. He's basically saying the same things like Newt Gingrich is saying. That doesn't help you win the elections. Complaining about the other candidate only makes sense if you've got some viable alternative. Something Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich do not have. I would argue that Mitt Romney could be weak as well because he's so rich, and he will be seen as out of touch, kind of obsessive. He's got this strange personality that people just don't like. But at least he'd be better than Rick Santorum. You've got to be kidding me. If the Republicans try to put Rick Santorum up against Obama, it will be like putting some little 5'0" little chicken hawk up against a pro wrestler. It's just not going to work. It just doesn't make sense. He'll get the evangelical vote. That's about all he'll get. So 33% of the country will vote for Santorum. Everyone else will pour out in droves for Obama. Do you really want a recreation of the Nixon years, only in reverse, where the Democrat gets every state but Massachusetts? Or something along those lines? Rick Santorum probably wouldn't even win his home state in the general election against Obama. That's how bad he is. At least choose from the two candidates that actually make some sense. Mitt Romney makes some sense. Ron Paul makes a whole lot of sense, although people don't give him credit for it. Don't put Newt Gingrich or Rick Santorum up against Obama, because I don't really like Obama, and I don't really want him to be president for 4 more years. I don't really like Obama. So can we have 4 years of somebody other than Obama, and stop fiddling around with these losers like Rick Santorum, who, let's face it, cannot win in the general election? It will never happen. Rick Santorum will never be the president of the United States. It's just not going to happen. All these pie-in-the-sky evangelicals who used to support Bachmann have rallied around him and made him powerful because he's our candidate. He believes in the Bible, and he wants to stomp down these damn gays and atheists and liberals. Well, that's all well and good to devise some sort of Judeo-Christian army against gays and liberals and feminists. That's okay to do if you want to do it. But don't expect them to win the general election. Maybe a state election. Put Rick Santorum in the Senate, where he can fiddle around and he can continue getting lobbyist money, which is what he's good at in the first place. But putting him up against Obama is a very, very bad idea. It's just not going to happen. And it was surprising to me that he won a single state. The fact that he won 3 in a row astounds me at how unintelligent the evangelicals in those states must be. Peace out.